Most people do not see God at work in their personal lives and therefore do not know how to join Him. This Divine Appointments podcast is to encourage you in your faith, to open your eyes to seeing God's hand at work. My hope and prayer is that by hearing these stories, you too will engage where God is already working and discover God's mission for your life. Hello, and welcome to my Divine Appointments podcast. And I have a wonderful friend of mine today, Dr. Cathie Phillippi. She is a pediatrician here in the metro area. And we were figuring out how long we've known each other since I delivered. She has an 18-year-old, so we've known each other at least 18 years now. So she is practicing pediatrics, and she's married to her husband, Mark, who's a nephrologist, and they have 3 children. And such a blessing to know her today. I just first want to read my theme scripture for this podcast, and that's Psalm 105, verses 1 through 5. Give thanks to the Lord, call upon His name, make known His accomplishments among the nations. Sing to Him, make music to Him, tell about His wondrous deeds, boast about His holy name. Let the hearts of those who seek the Lord rejoice. Seek the Lord and the strength He gives, seek His presence continually. Remember the miraculous deeds He performed, His mighty acts, and the judgments He decreed. So we're going to remember mighty acts in the life of Dr. Cathie Phillippi. There are a lot. So where did you grow up, Dr. Cathie Phillippi?
Well, I was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and lived there until I was about 6. And my parents split up, and we moved to New Orleans and lived there just under a year. And it was not a good place for a single mom with a young child with not a lot of money.
Only child.
And so we moved to Mississippi, to Clinton, because my grandmother invited us to come and live with her. And at the time, I didn't realize this, but her husband had passed away, and I didn't know them real well. I knew them, but we weren't super close. But now that I'm an adult, I understand what a big deal that was to bring your daughter, who is in a bad situation, and her child into your home to live with you. That's a big commitment.
That is.
And so a lot of my walk with the Lord, I attribute to things like that were like divine interventions that I couldn't see at the time, but it got me out of a bad situation.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And what was your mom? Was she working at the time? What was she doing?
So my mom, the divorce was a very nasty, very drawn out divorce, and my mom had gotten a job with the Girl Scouts of America, and that's how we ended up in New Orleans. But that place was not safe, and obviously her income was not enough to provide what we needed, so she ended up getting a new job here. She had a lot of experience with HR and worked a lot of different jobs, but mainly for the state of Mississippi and in some state jobs with HR. She definitely wanted me to be with her and not with my dad. And so, as anyone who has been through a divorce like that, whether you're on the child side or the adult side, it can become a really difficult situation. And in my young life, I remember having to go back and forth like every other weekend, and a lot of just insecurity and fear and not understanding. And I think now as a pediatrician, it helps me to have that experience, as painful as it was, to help families navigate that, or help children navigate that.
That may be why you were drawn to pediatrics.
I think a lot of my life, if I it's interesting. Like, I definitely want to do how I raise my kids differently. But I wouldn't say that has been as successful as, because I still flounder with my own kids sometimes.
That's humble of you.
They would laugh if they saw that. But I think as an advocate for kids and also an advocate for families and listening to a parent that is struggling, I feel like God has given me a lot of empathy because I watched a lot as a child growing up. And
I think you have it really, I said, a good radar. She knows, she can read. I've been impressed through the years how you're able to read a situation and kind of know what's really going on.
I think that's
it's like your radar's up. When you see little red flags, you put it all together.
And for a long time I didn't understand that, and I think spiritual gifts are something people should take the time to really understand, because they can be a great asset but also your biggest vice if they're not understood. And I think people who have a gift of discernment can become very burdened and frustrated, and when other people don't see the situation exactly the way you do and you're passionate about it, you at some point you have to be able to handle that, and using that discernment in ways that are constructive and not destructive is really important, which I still flounder at that sometimes. But yes,
you were from a broken home. You had a lot of childhood loss and anxiety and
a lot of anxiety.
Your dad was absent.
My dad was absent a lot. He, my mom, one of the things that she used to tell me is, you've got to quit hoping that your dad will love you the way you need to be loved, and let him love you the way that he can love you. And once I was an adult before I allowed that, because I just was mad that it wasn't the way it should have been. But often what we think should be doesn't happen in life. And I think that freed me up to forgive him for the thing that I wished he had been or wanted and him to be, and allowed us to develop a relationship that was different than I would have expected. But it ended up in the end helping me have closure when he passed away, and it helped me to at least be a part of his life.
So talk about how you went from Clinton Public Schools and how you went to Central Hines Academy.
Okay.
And
so
how did that come about?
We moved to Clinton when I was in second grade, and so I went 2nd through 10th grade at Clinton, and we would intermittently live independent of my grandmother. Things would be going better, and we would get out from under her help and live in an apartment, or at one point my mom bought a small duplex that was ours for a while, and again, it's hindsight is 2020. At the time I didn't understand economics. I didn't understand why it was unfair that lots of my friends had 2 parents and stability, and I can remember spending the night with friends was my favorite thing to do, and I was a student of families. Like, I watched families and how they acted and what they did, and would want sometimes to spend the night on Saturday night because going to church was so much part of our culture, and would visit different churches with families. And I don't know that they ever knew how much that was important to me. And now my children benefit from things that I learned just spending time with other people's families.
So were you going to church when you were a child?
My grandmother went to the First United Methodist Church in Clinton, and we would go with her some, but it wasn't something we did every Sunday. Now, my grandmother went, but I think at that time it was really hard for my mom because she was a single parent and being divorced and, living in a small town. It was just a time where that was not as welcome, and there wasn't a big singles ministry or, it was just, she just never really fit. And I think too was working hard to try to come out of what I would consider poverty. I mean, she really struggled, and so I would go with these families and observe, and everything from a Catholic church to First Baptist, Morrison Heights, all of those churches in Clinton. And
what were your perceptions?
Well, I definitely learned some things. Like, I didn't know the Bible, and I didn't grow up knowing a lot about the stories in the Bible. So, to think that there were people who talked about that at home a lot, or that was part of what they're teaching was really fascinating to me. I didn't really realize at the time what that really meant. To me, it was more like just extra stuff that you learned, or it didn't have a personal pull to me. But I was fascinated by it, and but I was a little afraid, and I always felt like I was a fly on the wall observing. I never really felt welcome. Like, I don't belong here, but wouldn't it be neat if I did? Or wouldn't it be fun if you had a family and you could do this? So to me, it was this is not what you can have, right? But this is what we have. Right. And so I do think a lot of the things that happened to me growing up, whether it was about the divorce or things that happened to my mom that were unfortunate, or consequences of choices that both she made and I made, and I think I have this really strong feeling of justice. I would say I have a strong justice part, and it was not fair, and it turned quickly as I became an adolescent into a bitterness. Like, well, I don't want to be that because I'm not welcome there, and rejecting those things became easy because I didn't feel welcome. And the word that I've been thinking about a lot this week, someone said it to me in a different context, and then I've just picked, how God will do that. Well, you'll just keep hearing it, and it's to be invited. And that, to be invited is different than to be forced or made to do or expected to do. It's an invitation to the family of God is different than just being forced or assigned to something. And for me, that personal thing is what drew me to Jesus eventually. It took a long time, but I rejected it wholeheartedly by the time I was an adolescent. Wow. I've had a lot of trauma therapy, and that's such a comical thing to say so casually, but I have worked through a lot. And my therapist does something called parts therapy, and my strongest part is my little girl part, and she is not seen, not known, scared, sad, feels like nothing is fair, and she's not sure if things are going to be okay. And so I operated out of that for a long time, and then this, we call her the raging lion part, was the adolescent came and said, we're not doing that anymore. I got you. And protected the little girl part, but raged at anything and anybody that threatened her in a way that was self-destructive. And then this manager part, that was a small part of me, but knew to make good grades. Yeah. That was a way, knew to follow most of the rules. But that manager part didn't really kick in until college, and realized if I let the raging lion be the boss, you're going to end up just like all the people you're trying to break free of.
You're saying what I've seen so many times in children and families and patients, and that's the child, somewhat of the childhood experience is so impactful in the rest of your life.
Yes.
And if it's traumatic like that, you do carry it on. I wonder if it's stronger for most people, especially a traumatic.
I think, from what I understand, and I'm not a therapist, but the memories, like, it's interesting that my kids don't have a lot of memories of when they're very, very young. And extreme fear or sadness solidifies a memory.
That's right.
So I have memories that I know were before too, because
it was so traumatic.
And I don't remember the details, but I know it must have happened before too, because at 2 this happened, so I know it was before that. And how do I remember that? And it's because fear will solidify that in your brain, and you're still, I tell people, this is kind of funny when I'm talking about doing drugs to an adolescent. When I'm trying to discourage people from doing drugs, I'll say, look, if me and your mom would like to go smoke weed tonight, guess what? Our brains are already formed. They're not forming anymore. Like, your brain is not formed. So to say that it's equal is not. Not that I'm going to do that or I'm advocating for that, but I think it sticks in their head because I'm like, if we want to go hang out and smoke weed, we already have a job. We've already graduated college. We already have a family. We've picked our spouse. All those decisions you have not made yet, and your brain hadn't finished.
Your brain's not.
So I think it's true also with like traumatic events of childhood that your brain is forming, and I think when I think about the thorn in my side, I think some of that stuff is the thorn. Like, it will always be there, and I can definitely call on the Holy Spirit to help me get through it, and I can choose to go to therapy and get healthy, but in the end, it's always going to be there.
So how, obviously the Raging Lion was going on in college, and that's when you came to Christ. So how did he woo you in?
Well,
what are the steps that happened?
Well, when I went to how I went to Central Hines is I decided I was just gonna drop out of school. I knew that I was going down a wrong path. I was hanging around a lot of people that were not healthy, and I was making really super bad choices. And I didn't want
to.
I recognized that I was going to end up living in a trailer park,
so
with
you
kids
weren't aware,
that weren't
self-aware,
and not married.
Yeah.
I just knew that was going to happen, and I felt a fear of failure. Like, I had this thing in me that didn't want to fail. And so
it wasn't like external pressure on you. You're in the bad crowd. It was internal.
No, it was internal. It was definitely something that I look back and think probably God was in his sovereignty calling me. There was something in me I couldn't shake. And all I knew was, well, I'm doing this stuff and it makes me feel terrible and it's not fixing anything. And so I don't want to do that anymore, but I don't know how not to do it. So I thought, well, if I could just get a job, I'm smart enough to take my GED, that's what I'll do. And through a crazy chain of events,
you changed schools.
I changed schools. And there's way more to that story that's kind of like shady. But I did... I changed schools. I called around and I talked to Coach Bryant, who the headmaster of Central Hines was, and I asked who was in charge of financial aid, and they told me him. And so he was actually the headmaster. I thought he was in charge of financial aid and was just a coach. And so I talked to him and I just told him my story and that I needed a fresh start. And he said, if you can pay a nominal amount a month until you pay it off, I'll pay for your books, just come on. And
wow.
So I know that was God, because I had never
wow.
been in a small environment like that where you could sign up to participate. There were 17 people in my class. If you wanted to be on the annual staff or the paper staff or a cheerleader or a back girl, whatever you wanted to do, the world was your oyster. I couldn't believe that. I signed up for everything you could do. I even joined the softball team and did not know the rules, and they were very gracious that they would put me way out in the outfield and hope no one hit the ball to me. But it helped me gain self-esteem. I made some really dear friends. I was loved. not in a way that was popular. I was just loved. I knew I was loved. The teachers loved me. They were kind to me.
And this was your junior and senior year, and you just jumped right in and made friends that fast. I mean, they had to be together for a long time. Huh?
And it was just they did. It was great, and I loved it. And I'm really sure that I would not be a doctor if I had not ended up at Central Hines, which I hear a lot of parents lament where to send their child to preschool,
right?
Like the best preschool. And I say I did not take a math I had not already had my junior or senior year, and what I gained in like exposure and confidence is what propelled me to be successful. So you have to always weigh that.
The environment matters.
Yes, it totally matters. And so anyway, I had this Bible teacher, Peggy Epperson.
Oh my goodness, I know Peggy really well.
I know. And I
we love the Eppersons.
Peggy Epperson saw the Raging Lion. And she was so precious to me. And
I don't know if I knew that. That's
oh my
incredible.
gosh, I remember her saying to me one time something like, man, God has such a call on your life. You are going to be something so special. And it makes me want to cry now because nobody really ever talked to me about that. Now, my mom, don't get me wrong, like she said, you can be anything you want to be and we're going to work hard, but it was different than having a complete stranger look at me and see me through God's eyes so that I could see myself like that, And I remember our workbook in English had scripture in it, and
I'm going to get my Kleenex.
Oh my goodness. And I remember thinking it was so weird, and just like no one was acting like it was weird, so you just kind of roll with it. And I'm just thinking, this is so crazy, like that this is Christian. I didn't even understand what that meant really. And anyway, she took us to Eureka Springs to the Passion Play, and it was just exposure to things of God that I would never have had. It was just planting seeds. And I didn't act on the outside like I wanted it. So that should encourage somebody.
Yes, don't give up.
Don't give up. Because I was absorbing it, and it was in there, and it was stirring things in me that I couldn't explain. And just like someone will plant, someone will water, like people came along in my life and watered those seeds, and it was just anyway. So I graduated, and that last year of college, my mom cut out of the Clinton News an article about the Jackson Rotary Club was starting a scholarship fund and to write an essay and mail it in by this certain date, and the date was like either that day or the next day it was going to be passed. And so I was like, Mom, I'm not going to be able to get it done. And she was like, I'm sure they'll take it, just and it wasn't, internet didn't exist, so I had to type it on typewriter and send it in the mail. Well, lo and behold, I got asked to come for an interview, and I showed up in a sundress that my grandmother had made me from a pattern, and everyone there, which now I know were probably Jackson Prep and JA and St. Andrews students that were in suits who lived in a different world, the world I live in now. I didn't even know what that was. I walked in and thought, oh my gosh, like I'm in the wrong place. And anyway, I ended up getting the scholarship, and I think that also was God's divine intervention in my life. And he was just wooing me and inviting me to come to him. And anyway, I ended up going to Mississippi College against everything in my body that wanted out of Clinton, Mississippi. I wanted to go away and do something else, but I got this great scholarship from the Rotary Club, and I had gotten like a Pell Grant, and I had an offer from Mississippi College that I just couldn't not take. And I remember someone telling me, well, if you get a degree from there, you're going to get a really good job. And in my mind, that was what hooked me. I'm going to get a really good job. And so my mom never liked her job. She always worked at a job that she did not enjoy. And so I didn't want to live like that. And I didn't want to have to work 3 different jobs at one time, or, you know, create shifts out of my jobs.
Right.
And so, anyway, went to MC in the first semester. I thought everyone was like crazy, and they were from like an alien world that I was super unfamiliar with, and I did not belong, because back then there was a 10 o'clock curfew for freshmen. Boys could not enter even the lobby of the dorm. I had not had a curfew in forever. Like, I was a mature grown up at that point, and probably really was a mature grown up. And I'm thinking, I do not even know what these people are doing. And so I decided after a few weeks, like, I'm going to have to transfer. And then a few weeks turned into a few months. And again, people loved me. They loved on me. They loved me because of what they saw in me. That was not something that I recognized. And I had a mentor and advisor that really encouraged me to do medicine. And that's kind of a funny story, because when she initially approached me, I'm a people pleaser, and so she's like, do you think you want to do the pre-med route? And I'm like, sure. And I didn't even know what she was talking about. I was just like, sure, I'm pretty good at science.
Sure, whatever you
I'm happy to do that. And so then when she started charting the course, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I thought we were talking about like nursing school. And she was like, no, this is, you know, this many years. I'm starting to get like dizzy. And I'm thinking, I just want a good job. Like, I wasn't in all of that. And so, but she just kept telling me I was smart and that I could do it, and that I was unique, and all those things that we all want to hear. And my mother said those things. So, I mean, for all of you that are listening, like, you know, there are things that I can say to my child 100,000 times, but if someone else says it once, it sticks.
Yes.
And it's like, you know, how is that? But it's true. And that's how the body of Christ works. Like, we have to be advocating for each other,
right,
and for each other's families.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, so I ended up doing, you know, well that first year, and I was still raging on the inside, and I was trying to walk the line of looking the part at MC, not really understanding, and still going out, partying, sneaking around, rejecting kind of the formality of religion.
Right.
And over time, my roommate, who went to Central Hines with me, and she will confess that she was scared to room with me our freshman year because I was crazy and loud. And she lived across the hall from me, and with another friend of ours, and then both of our roommates moved out and into an apartment, and so we ended up rooming together our sophomore year at MC. And she just was a dear friend, and she loved the Lord in a way that I had never seen, and I got to live with her. And she had these terrible cluster headaches that would wake her up in the middle of the night, and I would have to help her and like give her medicine. And everything that came against her, she handled with grace. She had a perspective that was peaceful, that was not anxious. And it spoke volumes to me, not because she said, you have to do this. It was just an example that she lived every day. And she never once said, why do you go out and party? Or why do you go to the bar? Or why do you do this? Why do you date that guy? Or whatever. Like, she never pointed out my flaws. She just kept living the way she lived, and loved me anyway. And so one summer we decided to take physics at Ole Miss, and she's like all gung ho, like, we're gonna go to a bar in Oxford. She would kill me if I say her name. But, like, you know, then we get up there to Oxford, and this is, like, in 1992 or something. I mean, it was, like, dead. No one's there in the summer. So and physics was really hard, and we were in class all day because you had the lab in the afternoon. It was really boring, and it was just not what we thought.
This is horrible.
Yes, but what God was changing my heart little by little by little. And my grandmother sent me with the upper room and with my childhood Bible.
The upper room.
And I'm a rule follower, and I'm very, like, diligent with studies. And so I was like, I am going to read this upper room every day. And I'm going to look in my Bible for the verse. Because the reason I don't know this is because I've never opened it and read it.
Wow.
So I started doing that. And every day I was, like, getting these truths, like, it was like God just was opening my eyes, and it was real, and it became real to me in that, you know, moment. And at the end of the upper room, there's, like, a perforated, like, card that you can pray the sinner's prayer and check the box that you did and put your name and mail it in and say that you did. And I just prayed that prayer in my room. And I went and told my friend Jenny, I was like, I think I just accepted Jesus. And anyway, so that was really,
I think I know your friend Jenny.
a moment. But I still was the raging lion, and I said, but I reject formal religion.
I'm not taking that.
Formal, all of that is like the Pharisees, and I do not do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can have your own personal understanding of God. You can study the Word of God, and you can do Bible studies, and you can have the same relationship. So I believed that, and I was going to a Bible study that was held in the basement of the cafeteria at Mississippi College by someone who had gotten out of Parchman. His name was Joe Shelton.
Wow.
And I bought my first Bible that was not a child Bible, and I still have stuff written in the margin that Joe Shelton said. And I considered that church.
Who invited you there?
I think I just heard about it, and anything like that I would feel safe going to.
Right.
Where some people would be
It's
scared
the
to go to it.
structure
Yes,
is
the
not
BSU.
the formal.
I felt like a foreigner. Like, going to a church building felt very foreign.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed that, but one night, this is a really great story. So in genetics, and it's divine intervention.
Yeah.
So in genetics, we crossbred these fruit flies, and you had to follow these steps, and it was like the fruit flies could get a disease and die, and if they did, you had to start over. And so mine, of course, got the disease and had to die and had to start over, and you have to set a clock and get up in the middle of the night and go over there and change them out. So that had happened to me, and so I'm really frustrated, and in the middle of the night, I go over to the lab. It's Saturday night, it's like 3 a.m, and I'm like doing my flies.
Fruit flies.
There was this other girl in there, and she's African American, and her name was Alicia, and she was doing her fruit flies, and we're just like tired, and she's making conversation, and she said, are you gonna go to church in the morning? And I said, no. And she said, where do you go? And I said, well, I don't.
That's what we say in Mississippi. Where do you go to church?
And I said, well, I don't. And she said, so are you not a Christian? And I said, as a matter of fact, I am. And I said, and I studied the Bible on my own, and I do not like organized religion. I do not do that. It has never made me feel good, and I do not think that is what God wants. And for me, you is fine, but for me, He is perfectly fine with me doing my own. And she said, well, you've never been to my church.
Wow.
And I thought, I never have been to a black church. Maybe I'll like that. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay. And she said, you should go with me tomorrow. Let me pick you up. And I said, okay.
Wow.
So I went back to my room and thought, why did I say okay? And so I was going to be really tired, but whatever time she told me to be there. And then I get up, and Jenny says, well, you better eat because I've heard that their services go really long, so you better eat before you go. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I'm kind of nervous, and I get dressed, and I go downstairs, and I get in her car, and she drives me to I-55 North, where Spice Avenue is. And it was Horizon Community Church, and Gary Mays was the pastor, and she was the only African American in the church. But it was a church plant, and it was contemporary, and I had never experienced that.
Wow.
And it was folding chairs and a praise band. I mean, but very simple. And I just wept. Like, I literally wept during the worship. And I thought, like, this is for me. I've been here. And so anyway, it changed my life. I got involved in a small group, and a couple that led it in Clinton really mentored me and taught me a lot and let me do life with them. They were a married couple that had young kids, and they were eager to pour into me and taught me so much. And Gary Mays,
they were your small group?
Small group leaders. And Gary, really poured into me, and just I can't even say enough great things that he doesn't even realize, because again, I was not easy.
That raging lion.
At all. And I had a lot of questions and a lot of baggage, and he really took the time to notice me and helped me go on my first mission trip to Honduras. And just the life that I know now, I look back and I know those pivotal things were God's sovereignty. I mean, he was just inviting me and pulling me and giving me opportunities. And it was faithful people who were walking with him that felt that nudge. I need to reach out to that girl, or I need to invite her to my small group, or whatever. And that I needed that. I didn't look like I wanted it, but I was desperate for it. And
you didn't even know what you needed.
No. So anyway,
so all those faith building experiences brought you to where you are today.
Yes.
So when people see the put together, perfect little family, Cathie Phillippi,
it is an illusion. I think when people, it is an illusion, but I do think that it is an example of God's grace and his, him being faithful to prosper us and not to harm us, and to give us hope and a future.
And that he sees you. And he sees you.
And we were talking before we started the recording, the verse that's really been on my mind this 2023 year. And I turned 50 last year, and just now seeing life through the lens of more maturity in my faith walk, and being able to look back and see how easily it could have gone different for me, and that it was just God's grace that kept drawing me. And what seemed hard, like figuring out how to do it, or being intimidated, or seeing the human flaws in religious people, and being real critical of that, how that could have derailed me to just be discouraged and just think, I got this, and how it could have ended so different for me. And that I can say that he is good, and that he sees me, and that I hear his voice. The verse is John 10:27. It's like, my sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. And I just think that is so rich, because not only, like Meredith was saying, her husband says, if I'm in a crowded room and there are lots of voices and I say my son's name, he turns
immediately.
And I feel like that I have spent enough time with the Lord now, and I've walked with him so closely. Sometimes when I felt like I couldn't walk and he had to carry me, that I do hear his voice now. And there are times I'm in a room with a patient and they're telling me a story about something, and in my heart I feel the Lord say, listen a little harder, or examine them a little differently, or and I hear that. And I mean, it's hard to explain to regular people, but I know that he cares about people. He cares about caring about people through me.
Right.
And
right.
I have an opportunity to do that.
Absolutely.
So
That's beautiful.
love it.
Thank you so much, Cathie Phillippi. Such a wonderful, wonderful story. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching this episode. Now you engage where God is at work. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you will be notified of future episodes.